My name is Christopher Goetz, and as part of the leadership of the Movement Disorder Society, we have an oral archive with the emphasis on interviewing our leaders. And it's my privilege today to interview my friend and long-term colleague, Dr. Caroline Tanner. So welcome, Carly, to this effort.
Chris.
I thought that we would start by just having you describe the major areas of interest intellectually in terms of research and academics that you've brought to our field of movement disorders.
Okay. Well, one of the major areas of interest is epidemiology, and I've been very interested in the epidemiology of Parkinson's disease and exploring epidemiology as a way of understanding etiology, and then ultimately as a way to get to prevention of disease. I've also been involved in epidemiology of some of the other movement disorders, so essential tremor, Huntington's, dystonia as well. So that's one big focus for me. The second is experimental therapeutics, and I've been very interested in clinical trials, understanding new ways to treat or intervene, and my ultimate goal would be a secondary prevention trial, especially for Parkinson's.
Secondary prevention meaning?
Meaning intervening after, well, 3 steps back. So the concept of prodromal disease, identifying people with early features that are predictive of the motor and cognitive problems of Parkinson's prior to the time that they manifest, and then being able to intervene so that they don't manifest.
And I could think back to our early training years, we didn't have even that vocabulary.
Yes, that's
I mean,
for sure.
the field has evolved with such rapidity, and the joy of it is to be a participant in it all. That's a tell us a little bit about your involvement with the Movement Disorder Society and how the interactions in the society have been hopefully important to your career.
Well, I'm a founding member of the Movement Disorder
are?
Society. I remember our very first meeting, which was very exciting, and the time leading up to that, when there was such a need for the Movement Disorder Society to happen. I remember the times of getting together with David Marsden and Stan Fawn and looking at the phenomenology of movements, watching videos and arguing about, you know, which is this and which
voting
is that.
on it.
Voting on which is,
as if medicine is democratic.
Those were the greatest times, some of the most exciting, wonderful times. But that led to the, recognizing the need to come together as an international community and build our field and our discipline. So for me, it's been a key theme to my entire career. I've been privileged to be involved in some of the leadership activities, to be involved in committees, and that's been very important.
I think that the kind of theme of the Movement Disorder Society is to be international, and certainly you, of all of us, probably the most international in terms of your research collaborations. Tell us a little bit about.
Right, so especially in the area of epidemiology, being involved internationally has been very important. So one of my early mentors, as you know, we worked together with Dr. Bruce Schoenberg, who had, untimely passed away as a very young man in his 40s, but was a leader at NINDS in international epidemiology and was an inspiration to me as a young person. He really sort of pointed me in that direction and allowed me to become involved very early on in teaching courses for neuroepidemiology and to recognize the importance of the international discipline. So over the years, I've been lucky to be able to have collaborations, especially in China, which is where Bruce kind of first introduced me to the field, but with people in many other countries, and also to follow in his footsteps in training fellows internationally. So I can count among our members here in the MDS and the Epidemiology Task Force, many of the people I've been privileged to have as fellows and then go back to their own countries and carry on the flag.
I remember just for the group listening, Carly and I trained together, so our whole careers have been intermingled. And Carly was so interested in China and epidemiology, and because I was her friend and colleague, I got a little bit brought into this circle very transiently. And Bruce Schoenberg, he introduced us to a series of Chinese experts who were visiting the NIH. And Carly was interested in a dietary interview. And so she presented this whole dietary interview to the Chinese specialists, and they looked at us and they said, good. And Carly very politely said, did I leave anything out? And the professor there, because everything was kind of in a hierarchy, said, yes, you left out snacks. And Carly said, snacks? And I said, snacks? I mean, my image of China wasn't that people sat around with Fritos or potato chips. But that wasn't what he said. He meant snakes, and that we had the whole area of snakes that we hadn't interviewed about because snakes were not part of our diet. But it was just the introduction. I said, oh, this is outside my league. I'm going back to my pharmacology. But I remember that, and you were so sincere, so sincere. Tell me more, or tell us more about early career issues. Bruce Schoenberg being very influential.
Right.
Other important early...
important people. Harold Klawans and Bill Weiner are really the reason I ended up as a neurologist. I was headed to be a family doctor, and felt that I needed a really good rotation in neurology because that would be hard to get in a family practice residency. And I asked around in Chicago, and I was told to go at that time to Michael Reese, which is where Harold and Bill were. And they said, you can only come if you can spend 3 months because neurology is complicated. You can't come for shorter time. So it was love at first sight. And I just was fascinated by it. And they both had the gift as teachers of treating a medical student like an equal, so that I really felt that I could interact with Bill and Harold. They engaged my mind, and I was just very, very excited about the idea of neurology, the pharmacology. I'd always been kind of interested in understanding thoughts and cognition, but psychiatry wasn't attractive to me. It seemed way too elusive. And this was sort of, anatomy, and found it in
the biochemistry of behavior.
It made sense,
yeah,
yes. And so this was the frontier. So I was very excited by that. And then you. So I remember hearing about you, because at the time that I was a student at Reese, you weren't there. I don't know where you were. And but I heard about you, and then I remember seeing you for the first time. I was at Rush, and I saw you walking past in the hallway. I said, I want to work with that person, right?
Oh, that's
and I was lucky to be able to, right? So.
Well, we spent many years together working in Chicago. Then we considered going out to California. You decided to do that. And what Carly did, different than many people who carry the titles of MD, PhD, in which it's all kind of done as a package. Carly had her MD and then started over in a PhD program at the University of California, which took you years.
It did.
But
yeah.
taking from the very basics and working as a physician, but going through the whole thesis defense and everything, quite impressive. It's something I considered, but you had the courage and the stamina to do it. So other important people. Anybody to...
the leaders in our field, I think we've been blessed by having very kind and very generous people in movement disorders. And so, I mean, there's a really long list of people, but I mean, David Marsden,
very generous.
Very generous, very kind. When I was young and naive and could so easily have been, kind of crushed by such a senior person, he was nothing but always kind and welcoming and supportive. Stan Fawn, the same way. Other people who have been very, very close to me in terms of work we've done together. Ira Scholson and the Parkinson Study Group has been another really important theme for me, and the area of experimental therapeutics. Tony Lang, a collaborator, you know, in many ways, PSG and other areas. You know, I'm blessed because there's more people than I can mention.
And I think that,
yeah.
I mean, I have the same image that those people in our early career, if they came up, and they did, and said, you gave a very nice presentation.
Yes.
I really enjoyed listening to you. It had such an emotional impact and such an inspiration, and that now I feel coming to the meeting, it is my job
That's exactly
to
right.
do exactly to take the time. It's so easy to walk out of the hall, but to go up and say, that was very impressive to a younger person. It is our duty.
That's right.
And it was those lessons early of how I was touched. And I had the funny experience this week at the executive board meeting. As the treasurer of the society, I had to give the treasurer's report. And I gave it, and I really worked hard on it and everything to make it clear. And afterwards, Stan Fahn, my mentor, came up and said, Chris, that was an excellent presentation. It's the first treasurer's report I've really been able to follow in terms of the challenges and everything. And I was like a little boy. I was so thrilled. So these things stay on forever and ever. But I consider it, in fact, a responsibility of mine and yours during this meeting to take the gifts that we received and to make sure that we transfer them to our next generation.
Absolutely, yeah.
Tell me, and this is an area that you and I really haven't talked about, are there any childhood, teenage experience events that have kind of charted you forward? Because we didn't know one another as little children. Anything to reflect with the group?
Well,
you know your father was important. And,
I wanted to do medicine from a very early age. I mean, I remember very clearly being about, 11 or 12, and in my small town in western Pennsylvania, there was a woman who was a physician, who happened to be my personal physician, and who was very encouraging to me. And my high school biochemistry teacher was also very supportive and encouraging, and just, kind of helped to inspire a love of science. And so, I mean, I think of those two people as being very, very inspiring to me.
I mean, the much of their perhaps audience is international, but Western Pennsylvania is rural. I mean, this is out where you would not. I come from an urban background. We have completely different backgrounds, and as close as we are, the road that Carly took must have been enormously challenging. To leave your area and to reach this stature is a longer journey than mine, and I have enormous admiration for you, my friend. That's
there's one thing I want to mention, back to the idea of influential people, is the women who were important to me in my career, starting with Peggy Hone.
Oh, my goodness.
Who was always another person who went out of her way to say yes, to be supportive, when there were almost no women in neurology at that time. I mean, one of the nice things about movement disorders, I think, is that it's always been quite welcoming to women, but there still were not really very many role models. So she went out of her way to be nice and supportive, and then the people who are more my peers or slightly my juniors, also, like Susan Bressman, Cindy Camella, who have been colleagues and collaborators, who are also, I think, very important influences to deal with the questions that are particular to women in trying to build a career and have the pressures of family as well, and those responsibilities.
And I know Claudia Trenkwalder, who's now part of the officers, this is one of her particularly kind of dear topics, is to watch this issue of women and movement disorders, where this is going, fostering whatever is needed to encourage these careers.
Yeah, I've always felt we were an area that was, maybe because we were new and we were growing, there was a lot more room, and there were a lot of women at the beginning of our field, people my generation or slightly, slightly younger than me. Yeah.
Just for the interview process, Carly's mention of Peggy Hone, this is the Hone of the celebrated Hone and Yar staging system. So a very early person in the field, a dear and just warm person who always took the time to just be sweet. And this is a tough field. It's nice to have a little sweetness.
And she's the kind of person who would come up and say, you did such a good job when I was so young and so nervous.
What kind of, you have any images of advice that you would share with younger colleagues in the field? Anything that you would, somebody listens to this interview, say, here's a little message to a younger person?
Well, my message is follow your heart, actually. I mean, find what you love and then just do it. I can remember, wanting to do epidemiology. I remember going to interview with someone in Chicago in the public health school, and I said, oh, I want to do a case control study. And he said, oh, I don't think you know what you're getting into. I think that's really too hard for you to do, but just don't listen to those people. And if it's something you love and you want to do it, just go for it. Yeah.
I guess I would think that you've had many, many examples of success that are inspired by just that, though, because when you did the military twin study, you were up against the U.S. government. You were up against, and you just plowed ahead. I said, oh, Carly, how are you going to deal with the veterans? And how are you going to and you just kept on pushing because that was in your heart. It had to be because there was nobody behind you because you were the starter of the field. But it does take that kind of, so not to do something that your mentor wants you to do, but to do something that you want to do, and that you can take. You'll write a grant, you'll be impassioned about it, it'll get shot down, and if you're devastated by that, you won't succeed. You have to cry, be angry, and then pick up and take the next step because you're passionate about it. It's true.
So the motto that I have in a little, right in front of my desk, so I can see it all
there.
The time, is I believe, I've been told it's various different origins, so I don't know, but I've been told it's a Buddhist thing and it's something else too, so I don't know. But it says, fall down 7 times, stand up 8. Right? I think that's what you have to do. And
I think that you've stood up many times and not
More
fallen
than 8,
often, but I understand it takes that stamina. Let's finish this by just a little bit of, I think, personal commentary on how a career can also include friendship. I think that you and I think other people in the society know this, that we really have spent our entire careers just kind of floating in and out of each other's lives, always supportive, always there to help. What's the impact of that, and does it fit into an academic career?
Well, I think we are so lucky that it has been the character of our careers. And the fact that we started together at a very young age.
Very young.
And we have been friends. I mean, we've been friends for all of these years, and I think that influences our interactions with everyone else, so that it's not the usual cutthroat, backstabbing, manipulating kind of academic approach to the world. It's collegial. It's supportive, and I think that's a wonderful thing. It's the way it should be.
Yeah, I think that I can say that I'm in really a completely different area of chemistry and developing rating scales, things that are different from what Carly's doing. But when I have a problem or a question that I need an outside kind of view, I always turn to Carly. And you've always take that as a priority to bring back. And likewise, I think you've utilized me. And that sense of trusted friendship is you can't purchase it. You can't really build it consciously. But if you're lucky enough to have it, everybody is enriched. And I think that people have commented on that about us over our careers with admiration, because we've sculpted it without really ever planning it.
Right, just is.
So I guess, do you have any final things you would like to share with this, for this process, or otherwise I would let us terminate and get back to the Congress?
No, I think it's been a privilege and a blessing.
Oh, good.
And my pleasure.
And as you
talk
said
with you.
before, it's given us an hour to
hour
talk to one
each
another,
other.
which is
Lucky
not
us,
something we
right?
get very often. All right. Thank you very much for your attention and for your participation in the Movement Disorder Society Archival Oral History Program.